Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this session. It'll be stereo now. Actually, if I hand that back to you, because we might get feed. Yes, my name is Bill Malcolm. First of all, let me start off by just saying a little bit about the City and Guilds. The City and Guilds group has been around since the 1870s, and we were set up by industry in the City of London, and that's where we are still based. We were set up to address, would you believe, a skill profit, and we are in fact operating under a royal charter. Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, is our president. We are based in London. We have offices across the UK, but importantly, we also exist in a number of countries around the world, and we have been based in this region for 10 or more years with our head office, our regional office in Dubai. We have a whole suite of qualifications that go across most industrial sectors. The group itself is quite a diverse group, but the key theme running through our operating companies is that we are supporting skills development. So apart from having this core business around the provision of qualifications, we also have a specialist leadership and management awarding and membership body. Kineo is our leading e-learning organisation, providing e-learning materials to industry throughout the world. I just wanted to mention that we also have a joint venture in India, which is set up with Manipal, which is a well-established Indian organisation, but set up to specifically address and work with the Indian government on its skills development program, and to work with them around the training of many millions of Indian workers to achieve their ambitious targets for the next 10 years. So we are a global organisation, and that gives a rough idea of where we are based. I say a rough idea because now this is not saying to you, aren't we great, we work with all these companies. This is about us saying we believe that partnership with industry is key to achieving success in the vocational sector. And we'll be referring to some of the project work we've been doing with some of these organisations. Gazan, I'm the regional manager for City and Guilds across the Middle East and North Africa. I'm lucky to be based in Dubai, but from that it allows me to get easy access to so many parts around the Middle East and North Africa. And one of the areas, of course, is UAE, which we work very closely with. Now they're an interesting country because it's developing its infrastructure to support technical vocational education. At the moment, it's established the NQA, which is the National Qualification Authority, and that's responsible for managing the development of a qualifications framework and the actual specifications for developing national qualifications. It also has a body called VTAC, which is the regulatory body for vocational education, and it's just recently, very recently, appointed two national awarding bodies, one called Dept, which looks after the Abu Dhabi market, and the other one is KHDA, which is responsible for the Dubai Emirate. So it's maturing in its
way of approaching and managing quality and Dept reform infrastructures. And that is that we offer that international passport for a passport to work for those who are coming in outside of the country. So I think let's move swiftly on, because one of the great things that they're really focused on, and you know, this presentation is focused around the UAE in some ways, is the focus on industry-led employment. And there's a big interest in supporting apprenticeships, particularly in the UAE. And I came across this particular poster. This is from the UK. And I guess in some ways it underlines the focus that we have in the UK of really having employer-led qualifications. These are some of the good things. They talk about that there's a low retention in work, 90% stay in work. We've got people who stay with the same employer, up to 71%. We've got 1 in 5 companies have a formal apprentice at board level. So for all these good things that come out for doing apprenticeships, they're recognised. And I can see in the UAE in particular, there's a really great focus on that. And we're getting a lot of interest from employers to structure to be recognised within their own countries of origin. So that's one of the reasons why they think foreign awarding bodies are very supportive for this migration of labour and skills. We actually translated it into return on investment to Dubai Police in the efficiencies that they gain from having well-trained private security guards supporting their work in the Emirates. I think one big area within the UAE is obviously work readiness and employability skills. I think you know, one of the key drivers for success is for those that integrate quickly within the world of work. And so ultimately it wasn't actually the qualification or the training in a particular area that was the real determinant of them being successful in work. It was really their attitude to work. So there is quite a lot of focus on that in the UAE, and actually ILM, the Institute of Leadership and Management, that provides structured pathways for progression within a company, provides a really good solution to that. And we've had significant funding from HSBC in the past to support those types of activities for a wide range of companies. The interesting thing about that one is that it changes behaviour at work, that the qualification and made such an impact in the company that has now really the whole culture of Dubai Aluminium is surrounding ILM and its work readiness, so they bring in fantastic Emiratis and they grow them within the company. So the other thing is effective training, and we talked about apprenticeships, and again I think we've had some really good results. They brought effectively unemployed housewives to come and work in engineering, and they put them through a 1-year certificate in engineering at a very low level, I hasten to add. And then ultimately they've got regulatory bodies that manage those qualifications and manage the training providers. This particular model is also in some ways a mirror image of what's happening in Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to hand over to Bill really to talk a little bit about that and that work and how that actually links in to successful Dept reform.
So, thank you, Tony. I think an important message from what Tony has just said is that individual organisations, employers, the needs of learners. And if we're talking about unemployed learners, then those people will potentially have other commitments, family commitments, and so on. So those need to be taken into account if we're going to help them become productive members of the workforce. And we also need to be working with governments and regulators to set the frameworks within which all of that can take place. So I'd like to say just a few words around what we're doing in Saudi Arabia, where we're working very closely with a couple of government-based organizations. Saudi Skills Standards, which will be the new regulatory awarding organization within Saudi Arabia, and Takamul, which is currently operating a sector. So they've developed with industry national occupational standards. From those occupational standards, they've developed and are developing a range of qualifications based on the standards which have come from focus groups, etc., all over the world to develop that. But a key part of that program is knowledge transfer. So the aim there is to develop a self-sustaining vocational structure that can be managed and run by Saudis, for Saudis, to meet the needs of the Saudi economy. And that works if you've got an effective knowledge transfer taking place as part of the development process. So I think that that's an important element in when you're looking at the vocational system, how it can be improved and so on. So often, all over the world, we bring in experts like ourselves to help us devise the systems that we think are going to work. It's important to plan for what happens when those experts leave. And the second example there is the Takamul Darub program, which, as I mentioned, this is specifically working with industry to develop qualifications that support the training programs that industry is running. And then these training programs are being made available to the unemployed graduates and unemployed youth within Saudi. And the training programs are being run by, and this is very early days, very beginning of the first pilot, are being run by the training departments of the corporates that are involved. So the incredibly close link between the employers, the organizations, and the trainees. And of course, at the end of the training, and these are very much on-the-job training, real work experiences, at the end of that training, for the successful candidates, there will be the opportunity of employment. Plus the certification that's coming from the Saudi Skills Standards. So again, it's tying in those key elements that make the whole process worthwhile for those that are participating. Employers get what they need, trainees get the training they need, and the employment at the end of it.
There you go. That's a lot better. So, so we're very lucky to, yeah. Oh, right. Okay, not without. Oh, God. We were very lucky to work with the Abu Dhabi Quality and Conformity Council in their focus on engaging with employers to really understand the standards behind the workers that worked in the construction and agricultural sectors in the UAE. And their focus there was to consider how best they could test skills for expatriates coming into the country. So again, what we're seeing is this really close connection with employers and understanding what employers want for their particular area.
Just a final example from another part of the world, from Ireland, and this was a project that we ran on behalf of an Irish government agency funded by European Social Fund, targeting the long-term unemployed. And I brought this one in because it does bring together, I think, the key messages that we're trying to make today. Firstly, it's targeting that difficult group, people who have been out of work for a considerable number of years and have therefore lost that familiarity with the workplace, confidence, work-based skills, etc. It's targeting them, a very difficult group. But it's targeted them in a way that links in with job-specific qualifications. So this is about training. In this case, there was customer service, logistics, business processing, very, very job-specific training that was chosen on the basis of labour market information. And that's where we identified shortages of labour. So again, thinking about some of the things that were said earlier, we have to be careful, and we've seen this in the UK, about training people for jobs that don't exist. And basing training programs, training provision on areas where there are vacancies, I think is critical, particularly when you're looking at people who have experienced unemployment. Building in work placement so that people start to experience the workplace, but in a safe way because it's part of a structured program. And I think an important part of this as well is how is it all funded? Because funding is there, it's come up a couple of times in the questioning. Funding is critical, and one of the things that, being a bit controversial, can be shown to work is funding related to outputs. And this program, the funding was staged, and the final tranche of funding was dependent upon people getting into a job. So training providers only got the last bit of their payment.
Impact workplace, again, another important training for professional and curriculum. These are things that we are.
And
so,
I think a few minutes. Last slide, and just looking at lessons learned. I'll pick one point, which is the employers. Totally and utterly, our focus is to support employers and industry. Ultimately, that's, I think, our greatest strength as City and Guilds and ILM. And how they're such an important factor in every single area for effective vocational education. And of course, ultimately, the thing that I think that people do want is the apprenticeship model, where they can take people from zero skills to the relevant skills relevant for that particular sector. And I think one of the, certainly one of the key challenges, I think, is, I think what Samya mentioned about the small and medium enterprise and how they get drawn into such a model, because the big, large organizations can handle this type of exercise. It's the small and medium enterprises which need support, and I think that's one of the challenges that we see, I think, across the Middle East and North Africa. Do you want to make a point about?
No, I think that's a good summary. So we're happy to take questions either now or given the time.
We've got a little time.
Okay, great.
The audience has been growing slowly and quietly during the session.
Shall we go through it again for those that weren't here at the beginning?
We can no longer run to a question each, as I thought we might at the beginning. But would anyone like to ask a question or make a brief comment at this point to the speakers? We've got 5 or 6 minutes of session time left.
First of all, thank you so much for this kind of presentation and the experience that you shared with us. I like the idea concerning sociological standards, which is standards for each country, and studying cultural differences. And I did visit lots of countries, honestly, and work in some as well. So there are differences and there are similarities. Just from your experience doing this kind of sociological standards, can we do something similar to each country, or do you think according to the similarities and differences we can do something for the Arab countries or for the MENA region, which is one of the important issues that all people are focusing on now? And when you design these kind of skills, a standard, did you start working with it from the whole levels, industries, universities, schools, or whatever? I do understand that each country is different, but I'd love to talk about this kind of ideas if there is possibility. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. Firstly, just to point out that with the Saudi skills standards, they're drawing in expertise from around the world. So we're working with them on one of the bigger projects, but there are a whole range of other organisations doing parts of what we've described. And I think that the message is that there are differences, and that's really important, and that's what certainly why Tony and I never think in terms of the UK solution or the English solution is the best solution. It's about there is experience here and experience there. And in fact, we've been having some interesting discussions this week around assessments and around turning assessments that have been written in English into Arabic. And it's not about translation, it's about localization, because it's about the context, it's not just about the words. So I think the first point to make is that we do need to take that into account. You can't just lift something and put it in. But secondly, and I think this is important, there has been so much work done on this around the world that I think there is a danger that countries can spend more millions of pounds or dollars or reals or whatever developing something which is already going to be expensive anyway. So for me personally, I think there is a starting point which draws on what's there and then contextualize that, rather than always start from a blank sheet of paper. Sorry, what was the other part of your... Yeah. I think it can work across national boundaries, and certainly within the GCC there is a drive to get a common GCC framework. I should also point out that within the United Kingdom we've not achieved that, so that we do have different frameworks in different parts of the UK. I think it's desirable if it works, if the similarities are enough, and I think importantly if there is a political will, because that ultimately could be the deciding factor. And it could mean that discussions get bogged down rather than achieving the advances that are really needed. Thank you.
We probably have time for one more question if anyone has one. If not, I'm going to call us to a close. Congratulations on the audience. It's doubled in the course of the session. So either we're particularly attractive here or somewhere else is particularly dull somewhere else. But it's great to see the audience swelling, and thank you very much for being here. I'd like to thank our two speakers, Bill and Tony, for a very interesting presentation, and one which I was fascinated to see leading on from Simon's presentation earlier, particularly when it was talking about employer engagement, but to see the whole way in which you take those lessons and some of those principles into an international market is really very interesting and stimulating. And I hope the audience would like to join me in thanking you for the time and energy you put into it. Many thanks.
Morning. I've been hearing people talk about English as an employability skill, but Professor Hanan talked about communication, and somebody else on the panel, well, I think it was you, Dr. Simpson, who talked about how to use the language. Now, this is a distinction I'd like to make, is between communication as an employability skill and English language proficiency, which is completely different. Now, I can be fully proficient in the English language or any other language. It really doesn't matter, okay? But it doesn't mean that I can actually communicate appropriately at the workplace. And we did actually in Bahrain, at the Bahrain Polytechnic, we did an industry research just to look at that in particular. And the results were overwhelming. The employees were telling us, yes, we are getting graduates who are proficient in the language, yet they are unable to communicate. And communication could be anything from writing to your boss saying, hi, Simon, you know, instead of good morning, sir, to actually writing a report or doing a presentation at the workplace, which again, the communication skills required between, you know, in IT are different from those in engineering, those from petrochemicals, and so on and so forth. So this is a distinction I'd like to make. Really, we should be talking about communication as an employability skills, regardless of the language. We should not be talking about language proficiency. That does not get me a job. That does not make me employable. Thank you.
Before we go into another question, can I just invite one or two responses from the panel, and then we'll go to another question. Any responses?
Well, I would like to, I think that I mentioned that in my introductory speech that the students who can communicate easily and effectively in English, because we can have graduates from English department, as I'm a teacher at the English department, but who cannot be effective in using English in the job market. So I will be later talking about how to improve skills, the communicative skills, but in the English language, because we know that there is a demand from companies, from organizations, etc., etc. So
I think you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you. It is about communicating and communicating in an interview. That's the first.
or MENA. And so the study concludes that in order for this, the return on investment to increase it, you have to have all these other factors in place. And some of them John mentioned this morning, but there are things like transparency, good governance, FDI. So again, bringing us back to the wider system in which education sits.
Thank you very much for that. And I think we're probably running out of time, but we do have one question here, and we could possibly have one more, and then I think we may have to call it.
Okay, since we're running out of time, mine's a little bit light-hearted, but it is the end of the first day. Sitting here feeling slightly sort of uncomfortable as the world authority self-styled on the teaching and learning of English, I did want to finish the day by telling you that the British Council also has a project to teach Arabic in London. And we started this in London with the Great London Authority, with Boris Johnson. We've got 50 schools now in the UK have signed up to this, teaching Arabic at primary level. We're talking to 2 UK universities about developing PGCE. Are required to become a school teacher for teaching of Arabic. So I say that at the end of the first day to kind of calm the nerves around the hegemony.
And I mean, we've been talking about the cultural value of Arabic for the region, but surely there's an economic value as well of building the informal sector, of local, of small business, of local businesses, of regional business. We're talking about partnership. I mean, the partnerships that happen in this region will happen in Arabic, and it will continue to be a very important language of economic development for this region. I imagine.
Is there one final one, or yeah, final question from the floor.
Just an anecdote from Gaza that illustrates some of these points. My name is Marilyn Garson, and although I'm clearly not Gazan.
Sorry, I can't hear you very well. I don't know if it's a volume. Sorry.
Okay. An anecdote from Gaza. My name is Marilyn Garson, and although I'm clearly not Gazan, I have lived and worked in Gaza for nearly the past 4 years in social enterprise. Working in the IT field, I have interviewed hundreds, maybe 1,000 young graduates, and I began by believing that the people who could give a good interview in English were showing me that they also had a number of other soft skills. I completely accept that this is not a shortcut, this is judgment. What I've learned through the years is that we can offer more to the people behind that front row. Very much like the owners of the Costa coffee chain, we've learned that by stepping beyond the people who are most able to reach us and giving them not instruction but experience in a multilingual workplace, not English, not Arabic, but both. We give them a chance to build on a whole range of skills in addition to their language. So as you've said, language stops being a hurdle and becomes a mobilizer. And I think it's a way to turn that obstacle into a real opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I thank everyone on the panel for some very interesting thoughts over the last 45-50 minutes or so. I'm very glad that you're also with us tomorrow, and we have breakout sessions with most of you, so we'll be able to explore some of these things further. So thank you very much indeed. Over to you, Ahmed.
We want to avoid the vicious circle, curricular development that is adopted to specific needs of the labor market. We discussed issues about governance. We can do a lot of things at the school level, and it also needs some decisions, some legislations from the top down. So I think these are things that have come. We've looked at entrepreneurship as an option for employment, and some of the delegates also mentioned that by creating or supporting 1 million entrepreneurs, you're creating 5 million jobs in the process. So I think these things are important. We've talked about engaging employers. We've looked at the UK experience and how it's institutionalized, but we've also learned that it has to be led, earning and learning at the same time. One of the nice comments, I think, is, again, when we are looking at how we do our work, how we support policymakers, decision makers, again, from Dalia Khalifa in the morning, changing the set and not just the mindset, I think, was one of the quotes. She also talked about the three education system itself. So we're talking about system, and then we have countries that are fortunately also facing conflicts. So there are a lot of issues that we need to be able to address. We've also touched about gender issues, about supporting young people also in career guidance. That was mentioned by Dr. Youssef in the morning as a policy that Egypt is trying to adopt. And in this interesting last panel, we've heard a lot of controversy about language and communication versus communication, but we've also decided that there is need for further research in this area, and we need to address this. So these are some of the ideas. I'm sure there were more in the breakout rooms, but unfortunately I was not able to participate in all of them. But we will have a detailed report and about all the discussions that took place. Just before I go into some, again, housekeeping information that I just need to, just to let you know that since 9 o'clock in the morning, we've had around 315,000 interactions through social media about the symposium. People, as we speak. Before we are meeting for dinner. We should be leaving here. Should please be punctual. 6:45 we meet by the entrance, and then we go by coach to dinner. Some people were asking about the dress code. It's smart casual, so you can take the tie off, and it's a relaxing atmosphere. We're trying to relax. Thank you for a long day. Tomorrow we start at 8:30 here in this room. Tomorrow we'll be having more breakout sessions, but we start here tomorrow morning with a plenary from Hanan Khalifa. We are having, again, I mentioned this in the morning, we are this side of the floor. Thank you. I don't want to be any long. I thank you very much for being here today, and I look forward to talking to you in a much more relaxed atmosphere during dinner and tomorrow morning. Thank you.